Hello, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Happy September. I hope you guys are enjoying the lovely autumn vibes. I'm not a pumpkin spice girly, but I do love Halloween. So I hope you guys are excited for spooky season. We're almost there. I know I am. I've already started reading a couple of fall vibey books, so I'm getting into the mood, and I hope you are too. It's a pretty good reading season to get all cozy under your blankies and just, have a cup of tea and read. So I hope I will get through a lot in next month, but this month I have 8 books to talk to you guys about. And I said on stream this was actually like a pretty easy reading month for me. Usually towards the end, like the last week, I kind of have to push myself to get through a couple books to add to our list, but this month everything just flowed really well. I thought I was going to get a couple more in, but I think 8 was a pretty good amount to start with. So yes, let's hear about all of the lovely stories that I read this month. First up, I finished the Poppy War series by reading The Burning God by R F Kuang, and I think that I kind of got tired of the series. I think that the first 2 books we did a lot of character development, I felt like, and then in the third book we kind of just threw it away. Like our main character just constantly gets manipulated and she does not learn, and it just gets frustrating, you know? Especially because I felt like the second book was all about like, I am my own person at the end, she's like, I'm my own person, like I don't need to be manipulated, and then in the third book she just gets manipulated again, and it's like, what the fuck? But yes, I thought this one was a little more, at least a different pace, because it was kind of like more of a post-war setting where everyone's like fully recovering and like, trying to decide what they're gonna do for the future, whereas like the first and second books were very much like trying to fight for whatever sort of government they wanted or independence or whatever they were striving for. So yeah, and I don't know, I think they introduced a really cool thing in the second book that the main character could do, and they never used it in the third book. They never used it. They were like, look at this really cool thing. I don't want to say it obviously because, spoilers, but it was such a cool, like, little fun trick that she had. And then they were like, oh, we're never gonna use that again. Oh, that was super helpful in the second book. We're never gonna use that again. And it just felt really stupid, you know? So I don't know. And there's a little short story in the back about one of the like the side characters. I didn't read it yet because I was just kind of not in the mood. But I don't know. I think the God stuff was a lot better in this one because I think it explored people's relationships with them more. And there was a point where they were creating new shamans, but they did not make very good use of these shamans, and it took way too fucking long to get to that point. I was really looking forward to like having new shamans because that was something that she was alluding to in the second book. She was like, we need an army of shamans that can channel gods, and then she made a couple shamans and then never used them. So I don't know, I feel like the third book was kind of slacking. Wasn't my favorite in the series. I think the first one's probably still my favorite. It just did it so well. But it was a still, nice to tie up the series and end it and not have to think about it anymore except for that side story, which maybe sometime I'll read. But otherwise, it was okay. Next up, I read a book by my favorite author. It's called What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher. It takes place in almost like the real world, but slightly different in that there's kind of like more supernatural stuff that's like happening. Like a lot of folklore is true, and maybe that's real in the real world and we just have never caught evidence of it. But yes, this one is about a kind of a gender fluid, non-binary mixed character. They're from a culture where like pronouns are really different and it's a really militaristic based thing, so a lot of people once they join the military they just kind of become like very fluent. They're like, oh, I don't really care what you call me, I'm just a soldier. It's like the series is actually called the Sworn Soldier series, so so it's an interesting world. There's like there's a couple different like cultures that are made up but kind of like tied into real places. Like our main characters from like a European culture, but it's not like in real Europe. So it's kind of interesting. It's like a speculative-y almost. But yes, our character has gotten a letter from an old family friend, and so they are going to go visit them because they're very sick. And when our main character gets there, they arrive at this really weird manor where everything's kind of like decaying and like in really bad shape. And his friend, like Madeline, like she's in really bad shape. Um, and I should mention that this is inspired by the fall of the House of Usher, or the House of Usher. I think it's just called the House of Usher. Um, so it is about the Usher siblings and their Usher manor. And they're so cool, except for the fact that they are really fucking sick and dying. And our main character is like, that's weird. Why are you so sick? Like, I don't see, like, you don't have any, like, thing to call this sickness. And they're like, no, I mean, like, we kind of do. Like, I called my doctor friend, but he doesn't really know what to do about it. And so they kind of are like, should I be here? Is this contagious? And it's mostly just about a friend who's trying to do anything to help their friends, except maybe they can't. And man, this book is hard to explain because it's just like it's a very ambiance-y kind of book. Like there's strange hares that don't act normal, hares as in rabbits, you know? And like a weird lake that like reflects stars that aren't there. It's so thick with like environment stuff. That's what I love about T. Kingfisher, man. Oh, she just makes me care about characters and worlds more than I even thought I could. Which leads me into my next book, which continues the What Feast or the Sworn Soldier series with What Feasts at Night. Um, this series is kind of like a series. I mean, you can read either book in either order. I feel like the second book has a couple like references of like, you know, the shit that went down in the first book, but not outright like says what happens. So you could read them in either order. But this one is about our main character again going to visit their like hunting house. They inherited this weird like hunting house in the middle of the woods near this town, and they're like, been through some shit, might as well go hang out at the hunting house. And when they get there, the caretaker of the house has died, and everybody is being like, oh yeah, he got killed by a spirit. And and the main character's like, no, but like what really happened? And everyone's like, yeah, no, shut the fuck up, it was a spirit. Like and apparently if you've ever heard the folklore of like the ghost that sits on your chest when you're sleeping and like steals your breath, that's what this book's about. It's not a spoiler at all. It's literally like in the first chapter they like talk about the spirit that steals your breath while you're sleeping, and so it's about solving the mystery of why this spirit is attacking and like what's its method and like who's it gonna go for. This one was a lot more dreamlike. I felt like the other one was really like earthy, where like, oh, we're looking at the woods and like the hares and stuff. The second one was very like dream statey, like, oh, I go to sleep and I see weird visions and I sleepwalk and like other weird things. And yeah, I thought this one had a lot of lovable characters too. I brought back one of the characters I really liked from the first book, and then it added a couple of other ones, and I do think that T. Kingfisher is just really good at making lovable characters, so I love that. Next up, I finished another series. I finally finished the Graceling Realm collection. I guess I should say I finished what's out. There is a mysterious book that potentially might come out that I haven't heard anything about except for on one random website. But sidetrack aside, yes, I finished the last book that's out, Seasparrow by Kristin Cashore, which focuses on Hava, a girl that we meet in Bitterblue, and she is on a lovely boat trip between Winterkeep, the place that we find out in Winterkeep, the fourth book, and back to her homeland of Monsea. And yeah, honestly, it spends a lot of time on this boat. It's kind of got like old Spanish explorer vibes where they're like crossing an ocean and then some bad shit happens. It's not really like spoilery, but yeah, there basically is a shipwreck and there's a lot of like traumaticness that happens to do with this ship. But our main character, Hava, she loves the sea and she feels a calling on this boat. And so we spend a lot of the story with her learning the ropes of a boat just like she does, which I thought was fun. It was interesting how Hava is so invested in like learning things, you know. I will say it felt a little odd to me. Obviously, as an older person, I can get hyperfixations too, but Hava is 21 and she read like a 12-year-old. I cannot even lie when I say the way that she approaches romance, friendships, interests, she read like when I was 13 or 12, you know? And I know that Hava has a little trauma of a background. If you haven't read the Graceling Realm, you don't totally understand that. So I can totally understand feeling a little like regressed in age, but I don't know. I just felt like she read really young for her age. And again, just like the way she approached a lot of things felt really immature and not in the like, oh, she's got trauma. It was literally like the, oh, she never learned how to fucking socialize, which obviously can be trauma, but she has not even made an effort to stop acting like a 10-year-old. It's crazy. Like I was getting frustrated with her at points, but I still think it was a pretty good like book for, you know, again, like the explorer vibes, because it felt very much like reading her journal as she's like making this big voyage. And I don't know, I think other than that, I don't really have a lot of complaints. I think the plot progressed at a reasonable rate. It was focused around these blue fox smugglers. If you don't remember when I talked about Winter Keep, they have these little like blue foxes that are almost like the size of a cat, and they form like mental bonds with people. And so somebody was trying to smuggle a fox from Winter Keep to Monsea, assumingly to sell it, and Hava finds it and tries to save it. And that's kind of like the big scheme here, is like, who's doing all of these weird, sketchy deals behind the Queen of Monsea's back and her entourage, because Hava's part of the entourage. So yeah, it was a little interesting. I feel like at this point, I've definitely got closure from the Graceling realm. Like, I'd probably read another book from it, but it really depends on who it's about, because there aren't many characters at this point that I would want to explore, you know? We've kind of reached all of our endings here, you know? We got Fire's ending, we've got fucking whatever Katsa's ending, Bitter Blue's all sorted, Hava's pretty set. Like, I don't really think that there's anyone else I need to know about anymore. So it really would just depend. And again, I only saw like one website that showed that she was working on another book for this series, so I don't know if she actually is, and I'm not really a social media author investigator, so I don't I don't look on people's like Twitters or Instagrams for authors, weirdly enough. So she could have said it and I have no idea. I guess we'll find out together if I read another in the future. Next up, I finished the book that we started on stream, but that I hated reading aloud, so I gave up on, Spinning Silver by Naomi Novic. A lot of you probably know the basis of this story. It's about a girl named Miriam, whose dad was a kind of loan shark, but he never went and got never collected the dues of his loans, so her family kind of grew up really poor and she hated it, and one day she snapped and said, you know what, I'm gonna go collect my dad's debts. And so she kind of becomes this debt collector, really renowned. She jokes about how she can turn silver to gold because she's just so good at being a merchant, which is true. She like is a trade god. She like goes and buys goods and like sells them for the perfect amount to the perfect people. But she's just a little too good, and some fairies are attracted to all of this. And some shit kind of goes down between her and a fairy, and, you know, her family gets all comfortable with all this money, but at what cost, you know? So, kind of at that whole thing. I feel like the side plots in this book were really garbage. I didn't really care about Wanda's plot. Irina's was okay. But again, I don't know. I will give this author credit that I feel like a lot of the different POVs felt different, but a lot of the different POVs weren't necessary. I don't need Irina's nursemaid. I don't need Irina's husband. I don't need Wanda's little brother's POV. I don't care about these people. This author does not do a good job of making me care about their characters. It was a really weird book, and one of the POVs was just written really like choppily, and unfortunately they chose to write like the biggest fight scene of the book like where they actually like employ this big plan that they've been talking about to like save three of the girls at the same time. And then they write it from like this choppy, shitty POV where it just reads really poorly. So the whole fight sounds like they did this, then they did this, then they did that, they did this, oh, they did that. And it was just so bad. Oh my God, what a disappointment. And it was kind of just like, nothing happened for like 80% of the book, and then that last 20%, like so much happened that it didn't even fucking make sense to me, you know? Obviously at that point I was like not super invested, so I'm not paying as much attention, but I don't know, it was a whole fucking mess, you know? Like they do one thing and then you as the reader are like, obviously that's a stupid fucking decision, and then in the book they're like, oh, that was a stupid fucking decision, and it backfires on them, and then they have to fix that, and it's like, who thought of this plan? It was such a stupid plan to begin with. God, I hated it. I hated it so much. If you don't want spoilers, now's your time. For those of you who want some closure, here's my little rant. Basically, they had the big plan of using Irina's husband, Mernadius's demon that wants to eat people's souls, and they were like, oh, well, we need to get rid of that fairy king who's causing eternal winter. What if we feed the fairy king who's causing eternal winter to a fucking demon who fuels himself off of the power that he eats? Okay, right? Okay, so then they capture him and they're like, here you go, Mernadius, eat up. And Mernadius's demon is like, oh, I want the king's true name because I'm gonna go to his kingdom and eat everybody. And the king's like, well, I don't want that to happen. I'm not gonna give you my name. And so Mernadius like eats the shit out of him, gets super powered, breaks into the fucking fairy world, and then they're like, ooh, sorry, fairy king, that we captured you. That was really stupid of us. Will you help us stop him? And he's like, well, obviously. I don't want all my people to fucking die. And so they let the fairy king go, and honestly at this point I'm skimming because this is just such annoying bullshit. And so they solve the fucking problem with the demon because they know his true name or whatever, and so the fairy king beats him. And then guess what? Fucking Miriam, who this whole time has been like, I don't want to be with the fairy king, I don't want to be in the fairy kingdom, she's like, maybe I like him, and lets him fucking propose to her again, because he's like, damn, you fucked with me so hard that I'm in love with you because you're just such a juke queen. God damn, you pranked me so hard that that's so hot. And so he falls in love with her and is like, will you marry me again? And she fucking says yes. She says yes. She says yes. But here's the fucking deal. She's like, I'll only go with you in winter and when I feel like it. So he marries her so that she can come out in winter like fucking Persephone, but only if she feels like it too. Like, obviously good for her that she's getting her consent involved, but like, what the fuck? What the fuck? Anyways, that's my spinning silver rant. The end. Next up, I read a speculative fiction book, which is kind of my book I would normally read this month because it honestly didn't draw me in at first, but then I read the back a little bit more and I was like, you know what? This sounds interesting. And it's called American Hippo by Sarah Gailey. Basically, the premise of this book started on the idea that back in like 1917, when, you know, the country was kind of like shitty, down south where it's all swampy and gross, it's really hard to have farmland, and so people down there had a hard time like growing and getting like meat. So the American government kind of proposed this bill where they were like, what if we domesticated hippos and just had hippo farms and you guys ate hippos? It didn't go through, but in this book, American Hippo, it did. And so you kind of get this cool cowboy gunslinging, like, hippo riding story about doing a big heist with hippo riders. So they're basically cowboys, but they've got hippos and they're in the down in the south. So there's swamps and dams and dangerous feral hippos. And I really liked this book. I thought it was really fun. I mean, it's a collection of short stories, so there's kind of 2 longer stories and then 2 shorter stories. I will say, I think one of the longer stories I didn't really like, and then one of the shorter stories I didn't really like. But the main story, which was River of Teeth, the original that started this whole little collection was really, really good. And yeah, it's about a big old heist where our main character, Houndstooth, he's kind of a rootin' tootin' rancher of hippos, but you know, he's got some bad backstory, some bad blood, and he's going out and he's collecting his best assets, you know. I want the best demolitionist, I want the best burglar, I want the best this, you know. So he goes out and he collects all of these iconic fellow hippo riding rootin' tootin' cowboys, and yeah, they go on a big old heist. I thought it was really fun. I normally don't really like cowboy kind of stories, but I think that the hippos really intrigued me. I thought it was really cool. Honestly, there was a lot of interesting stuff about different like breeds of hippos, whether they were speculative like fiction or not. Like I don't know if these were real types of hippos, but they were really cool and I was really invested. And apparently there's an actual like a nonfiction book called American Hippo that talks about a lot of the like bill proposing to get hippos into the South and stuff. So if I'm interested in the future, maybe I'll continue and read about the real rootin' tootin' hippos down south that didn't actually get to be, you know? It was really fun, though. It was quite a different change of pace. I don't usually read, you know, Wild West stories, so a little bit different. Next up, I read a book that felt like it was meant to be. I went book shopping and there was one copy of this book and I've been looking for it for like 2 years because I wanted to have it physically. And it's called Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. This book is super weird and trippy and kind of hard to explain, so I apologize if it doesn't make a lot of sense or if it makes sense but just sounds really weird. Basically, you follow the main character who goes by Piranesi, but he himself admits that he doesn't really know if that's his name, and he lives in this place that he calls the house, and it is made out of expansive hallways that seem endless, you know, lots of random doorways and tons of cool marble statues. And Piranesi can't remember anything but being in the house, and the house provides, whether it be, you know, gross but, you know, nutritious seaweed, fish here and there, and things to patch his clothes. Piranesi doesn't know anyone else that exists in the house except for one other guy who he meets on Thursdays, or what he assumes is Thursdays, but sometimes keeping track of time can be hard. And yeah, this is kind of in the same breed of the library at Mount Shar, where it's a really trippy kind of in your head book. I can't explain too much of it without spoilers because you are, you know, alongside Piranesi. He doesn't really remember anything other than the house, and soon enough you don't really know much except for what Piranesi tells you, which is all he knows as well. And, you know, eventually Piranesi finds something different in the house, and that maybe unravels some stuff for him, you know? He starts looking into things a bit more, and maybe the house isn't all that he thought it was. Maybe there's more to it, and maybe there's something going on here. Maybe there's even more people in the house than he thought. But who knows? Who knows? Yeah, again, a little short for me to talk about a book like this, but I can't say much plot-wise. Man, this book was great. I thought the fucking vibes of it were great. You read it as like journal entries. So like what I was saying earlier with Seasparrow and feeling like you're reading like an explorer's journal, this it literally feels so fun to read. It's like an explorer fell into Wonderland, doesn't fucking understand how he got here, when he got here, whatever, and has just like, you know, cataloging what he sees, and you just follow this, and it's like, is my journalist even a reliable narrator? I don't know. Is the people telling, or is this guy telling him what, you know, what he says, is it true? Like, you know, you get all of these things, and you're getting to be paranoid just as Piranesi is, and it's just so good. Ugh, I loved it. I'm really glad I waited till I had like the physical book to read it, because like holding it in my hand was just so good, and it looks nice. I like the book a lot. Piranesi, Susanna Clarke, big recommendation. Yeah, loved it. Last but not least, I read Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Faeries by Heather Fawcett. This book unfortunately did have the romance tag, so I knew what I was getting into a little bit, but I still wanted a fun book of fae trickery, and that's what I got. Emily Wilde is our main character, and she is a professor of, like, I don't remember, oh, dryadology, that's what they call it. I was like, what's the exact phrase she uses? But yes, she calls it dryadology, and it's like the study of the fae in the world, where in this world, all the fae that you've heard of, they exist out there, you know? It's just a matter of cataloging them. And that's what Emily wants to do. She goes out and investigates the different types of fairies that she hears about, and she writes them down in her big old encyclopedia. And she also just tries to kind of like solve people's problems with fairies when she comes across them, you know? Like, oh, this fucking spirit is pissed because people keep coming into its woods and wearing silver or whatever, and so she like negotiates with it. Usually not because she wants to help people, but more because she wants to know how fairies think. And I will say, a long time ago, I read the book Caravel by Stephanie Gerber. Is that her name? I don't know. I'm gonna put it on screen. But uh, I was really hoping that that book would kind of have a little bit of fae trickery, because it was kind of about like a weird circus where people weren't what they thought, but there was never any fae stuff in that. This one is like full of fae trickery, you know, like she has to negotiate and be careful with her words. She has to like offer things that aren't too crazy or, you know, too out of her field, because if you don't deliver, then the fae will fuck you up. So it's really interesting looking into the minds of the fae and like someone who knows how to deal with them well. I enjoyed that. I think the romance in this book was really bland, and honestly, I think that the two characters are only in love because they don't spend time with anyone else. So yeah, and honestly, I really think that she needs to get her standards off of the floor, because the man spends like the whole first half of the book like sleeping with a ton of women, and then the second half of the book being like, what do you mean, I've always loved you, Em, it's always been you, Emily. And it's like, shut the fuck up, whore. You were out sleeping with every girl in the village, I don't want to hear it. He's like, but you're the one for me, it's always been you, Em. No, it fucking hasn't. It was fucking Tiffany last week. Like, shut the fuck up. Yeah, I don't know. I thought the romance was so boring. They should have just stayed friends. It was so stupid. But, you know, I enjoyed the Fae trickery. I think that the Fae worlds were really cool. I think the designs of a lot of the fairies, like the way they were described, oof, really cool. There's a lot of ice thematics in this, so like you'll just be talking about the winter like all the time. They basically go to Greenland for the main setting, so it is cold and icy all the time. But yeah, I thought it was really well described and such. I don't know if I'll continue the series because, again, I think the romance is really boring, and you know, if it's gonna be a persistent thing, I don't really care. But you know, I think the fairy stuff was really well handled and stuff. I think that was cool. So if that's gonna stay relevant, then perhaps I will continue. We shall see, we shall see. Thank you very much for joining me for my rambling this month, and I hope I will see you guys again next month with a couple more books to talk about. Yes, yes, indeed. Let me know if there's anything you guys read that you enjoyed this month, or you think that I should read anything in particular. I always love recommendations, so do let me know down below, and have a happy beginning to your fall. Hopefully you're beating the heat now that the sun is chilling out a bit. See you all again soon, and have a comfy, comfy month.